For weeks, I had been planning this trip, and I was going alone. After 23 years of marriage, the divorce papers were finally signed in August. By October, I needed to get away from everything: the empty house, and the pitying looks from friends, the constant reminders of what used to be. I needed to clear my head. I found North Point Lodge on a specialized fishing website. It was a remote timber frame cabin on the eastern shore of Lake Superior, accessible only by a 5-mile dirt road that wound through the Ottawa National Forest. The listing promised complete isolation, excellent lake trout fishing, and no cell service. Perfect. I booked it for a long weekend in late October. Just me, my fishing gear, and silence. The drive up from Green Bay took nearly 4 hours. The further north I went, the more the world fell away. Highways became county roads became gravel, and gravel became a rutted dirt track that punished my truck's suspension. My phone lost signal about 40 minutes before the turnoff, and I felt a strange sense of relief watching the bars disappear. When I finally emerged from the tunnel of pine and birch trees, the sight took my breath away. North Point Lodge sat on a granite outcropping that jutted into the vast, steel-gray expanse of Lake Superior. The main cabin was beautiful: weathered cedar logs, riverstone chimney, and a wide deck overlooking the water. A wooden dock extended into the lake with an aluminum fishing boat tied alongside. Behind the cabin, dense forest pressed in like a wall. I couldn't see another structure in any direction. The only sounds were wind in the pines and waves lapping against rock. I was completely and utterly alone. It felt like exactly what I needed. I spent Friday afternoon unpacking and getting oriented. The cabin was well equipped: propane stove, wood-burning fireplace, kerosene lamps, and a backup generator in the shed. The owner had left detailed instructions on a clipboard: how to work the water pump, where the firewood was stacked, emergency numbers for the marina 15 miles south by water. Not that the numbers mattered. The landline was dead. Apparently a tree had taken down a line somewhere. "Happens every fall," the owner had mentioned casually when I'd called to confirm. "You'll have the marine radio in the boat if you need anything. Channel 16. That first night, I grilled a steak on the deck, drank 2 beers, and watched the sun sink into the lake in a blaze of orange and purple. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. Saturday morning, I was up at dawn. The lake was glass calm, perfect for fishing. I loaded my gear into the boat and spent the morning working the drop-offs about a quarter mile from shore. By noon, I'd landed 3 beautiful lake trout, each one over 5 pounds. I cleaned them on the dock, filleted them in the cabin's kitchen, and put them on ice. The afternoon was warm for late October, unseasonably warm, actually. I sat on the deck reading a book, occasionally glancing up at the lake. Around 4 o'clock, I noticed something odd. The sky to the northwest was darkening, and it was happening fast. A solid wall of purple-black clouds was building on the horizon. I'd grown up near the lake. I knew what that meant: superior storm. They came up sudden and mean in the fall, especially in the late afternoon when the temperature dropped. I started securing things on the deck: folding chairs, the grill, loose tools. The wind was already picking up, and the temperature had dropped at least 10 degrees in 20 minutes. That's when I heard the outboard motor. I walked to the edge of the deck and looked out across the water. A small fishing boat was coming toward the lodge, maybe 300 yards out. Even from that distance, I could tell the operator was in trouble. The boat was riding low, taking waves over the bow, and the motor sounded like it was straining. The wind was howling now, whipping the lake into whitecaps. The sky had gone from blue to bruised purple in minutes. I could see the rain curtain moving across the water toward me like a gray wall. The boat limped up to the dock just as the first fat raindrops started hitting the deck. A man stumbled out, nearly falling as he tried to tie off the boat. He was maybe 55, weathered face, wearing a soaked flannel jacket and a Green Bay Packers cap. "Thank God," he shouted over the wind. "Thought I wasn't going to make it. Engine started cutting out about 2 miles back." I helped him tie the boat securely as the storm hit full force. Rain came down in sheets, and the temperature plummeted. His boat was taking on water, the bilge pump struggling to keep up. "We need to get inside," I yelled. "This is going to get worse." We ran for the cabin. By the time we got through the door, we were both drenched. The man was shivering, his lips starting to turn blue. Superior's water temperature in October was maybe 45 degrees. If he'd gone in, he wouldn't have lasted 15 minutes. "I'm Vance," he said, teeth chattering. "Vance Holloway. I fish out of Marquette. Was heading back when the engine started acting up. Saw your dock and made for it." "Wesley," I said, grabbing towels from the bathroom. "Here, get out of those wet clothes. I've got some dry stuff you can borrow." Outside, the storm was a freight train. Wind screamed through the pines, and waves crashed against the granite shoreline with sounds like thunder. The cabin lights flickered once, twice, then died. The power was out. "Happens every storm," I said, lighting the kerosene lamps. "I'll get the fireplace going." Vance changed into some of my spare clothes, too big on him, but dry. I built up a fire and put on a pot of coffee on the propane stove. We sat in the flickering lamplight, drinking coffee and listening to the storm rage outside. "Hell of a storm," Vance said. "Came up fast even for Superior. I've been fishing these waters 30 years, and they still surprise me." We talked for a while. He told me about his charter fishing business, his kids, his wife who'd passed away from cancer 3 years ago. I found myself telling him about my divorce, about needing to get away. It felt good to talk to someone who understood loss. The storm showed no signs of letting up. Thunder rolled across the lake, and rain hammered the roof like nails. Around 8 o'clock, I heated up some of the trout I'd caught that morning, made rice, opened a couple of beers. "You saved my life tonight," Vance said. "That storm would have swamped me for sure. I owe you one." "It's the lake code," I said. "You help boats in distress, no question." We were just finishing dinner when I heard it, barely audible over the storm. Another outboard motor. Vance heard it too. He looked toward the door, his expression unreadable. "Expecting someone?" I asked. "That'll be my buddy Gavin," Vance said, standing up. "I radioed him before my engine died. Told him where I was heading. He must have come out looking for me." Something in his voice had changed, just slightly. The warmth was gone. I walked to the window and peered out into the storm. Through the rain-streaked glass and the darkness, I could see a flashlight beam on the dock. A figure was tying up another boat. Vance was standing behind me now, too close. "Wesley," he said quietly, "I need you to do exactly what I say." Before I could turn around, I felt something hard and cold press against the back of my neck. Metal. A gun. "Don't move," Vance said. "Don't make a sound. My friend Gavin is coming in, and we're all going to have a very calm conversation. Understand?" My mouth went dry. My heart slammed against my ribs. What do you want?" "Everything you've got," he said simply. "Wallet, truck keys, phone, whatever valuables you brought. This is a robbery, Wesley. Don't make it a murder." The door opened, and a younger man came in, maybe 30, built like he worked construction, wearing a rain slicker. He pulled back his hood and grinned at Vance. "Nice work, old man," Gavin said. "Storm's perfect. Nobody's going anywhere tonight." He looked at me, still frozen with the gun at my neck. "Sit down at the table, hands where I can see them." I sat. Vance kept the gun trained on me, while Gavin moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency. He found my wallet on the counter, my truck keys by the door, my phone charging near the fireplace. He dumped my duffel bag out, taking my watch, my wedding ring, my ex-wife's ring, actually, the one I couldn't bring myself to sell. "No laptop?" Gavin asked. "I didn't bring one," I said, my voice shaking. "I came here to disconnect." "Truck?" Vance asked. "Keys are right there. 2019 F-150, end of the dirt road." Gavin smiled. "Perfect. We'll take good care of it." He paused, looking at Vance. "What about him?" My blood turned to ice. Vance studied me for a long moment, the gun steady in his hand. "The storm will keep him here at least until tomorrow afternoon," Vance said. "Roads will be washed out, maybe longer. By then, we'll be 3 states away." He looked at me. "You're going to stay right here in this cabin, Wesley. You're not going to try to follow us or be a hero, because Gavin here is going to take your boat motor. You'll be stuck here with no vehicle, no boat, no phone. Understand?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Good. One more thing." Vance gestured to Gavin. Gavin walked behind me. I started to turn, but Vance raised the gun. Eyes front. The blow came from behind. Something heavy, maybe the butt of another gun or a flashlight. Explosive pain, white stars, and then the floor rushing up to meet my face. When I came to, the cabin was empty and silent, except for the dying crackle of the fire and the continued roar of the storm. My head throbbed with a sickening pulse. I touched the back of my skull, and my hand came away sticky with blood. I staggered to my feet and checked the cabin. They'd taken everything of value: my wallet, my phone, my truck keys, my watch. The marine radio was smashed on the floor. I stumbled to the door and looked out at the dock through the rain. Both boats were gone, Vance's and the lodge's. I ran to the shed where I'd parked my truck. Empty. I stood there in the rain, feeling the cold water run down my face, mixing with blood from the wound on my head. The storm showed no signs of stopping. The road would be impassable until someone from the Forest Service came to clear it, maybe days. I was stranded in the middle of nowhere, with no vehicle, no boat, no phone, and a head injury. The nearest help was 15 miles away across storm-tossed water, or 5 miles down a washed-out road through dense forest. I trudged back to the cabin, barred the door with a chair, and sat shivering by the dying fire. The storm raged on through the night. I didn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. What if they came back? What if there was a third partner? At first light, the rain finally stopped. I knew I had to move. I couldn't wait for help that might not come for days. I found the emergency supply kit the owner had left. First aid supplies, energy bars, a compass, waterproof matches. I bandaged my head as best I could, filled a water bottle, and started walking. The 5-mile dirt road was a disaster. Washouts, fallen trees, deep mud. It took me almost 4 hours to reach the highway. A passing pickup truck stopped when the driver saw me stumbling along the shoulder, dried blood in my hair, covered in mud. The driver called the police. They took my statement, checked the hospital for my concussion, and drove me to the lodge to document the scene. The case is still open. Vance and Gavin were never caught. They told me this was a known scam in remote areas. Criminals who monitor rental listings, target solo travelers, use storms and isolation to their advantage. They're professionals, probably working their way around the Great Lakes, hitting a new lodge every few weeks. I got my truck back 3 months later. It was found abandoned in a Detroit chop shop, stripped of everything valuable. My insurance covered most of it, but not the things that mattered. Not my grandfather's watch, not my wedding ring. But what they really took was something else. They took my peace. That feeling I had on the deck that first night, watching the sunset, feeling calm for the first time since the divorce. I don't know if I'll ever get that back. I haven't been fishing since. I drive past sporting goods stores and feel my chest tighten. I see Lake Superior on the news and my hands start to shake. And I learned something that weekend that I wish I didn't know. The world is full of predators who count on your decency, your willingness to help someone in trouble. The Lake Code helped boats in distress. They weaponized it. They turned my humanity into a trap. Sometimes late at night, I wonder what would have happened if I'd just watched that boat struggle in the storm. If I'd stayed inside and let Vance figure it out on his own. Would that have made me a bad person? Or would it have made me safe? I don't know the answer. All I know is that the monster wasn't in the storm that night. He was the one I invited in from it. Let me tell you about the weekend that reminded me why I carried a badge for 30 years. My name is Vernon Donovan. I'm 58, been retired from the police force for 3 years now. After my divorce, my relationship with my son Blaine got complicated. He took his mother's side, and I can't blame him. We've been trying to fix things, slowly. When I suggested a weekend at a cabin I'd rented up in the Cascades, he surprised me by saying yes. Even brought along Blaine Anderson, my old partner from the force. Blaine retired 2 years before I did, and we'd stayed close. He said he was coming for the beer and the stories, but I knew he wanted to help Blaine and me reconnect. We arrived Friday afternoon, later than planned. The drive took longer than expected, winding mountain roads and spotty GPS signal. The cabin sat at the end of a rutted dirt road, surrounded by dense pine forest. It was exactly what the listing promised. 2 bedrooms, a stone fireplace, and a porch overlooking the valley. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles down the mountain. "This is seriously remote, Dad," Blaine said, checking his phone. "Barely 1 bar of service." "That's the point, son," I replied. "We're here to unplug." Blaine was already hauling gear from the truck. Coolers, fishing rods, his old police scanner. I raised an eyebrow at that last item. "What?" He grinned. "I'm sentimental. Besides, you never know. We spent the evening settling in. Blaine grilled steaks while Blaine tried to get the Wi-Fi working. There wasn't any, despite what the listing claimed. I built a fire in the pit outside, enjoying the quiet. The October air was crisp, leaves crunching underfoot. For the first time in months, I felt myself relaxing. That feeling lasted until the next morning. I woke early, habit from 3 decades of shift work, made coffee, stepped onto the porch to watch the sunrise. That's when I saw it, a white square tucked into the mailbox attached to the porch railing. Strange, because we hadn't gotten any mail, and the property management company said they'd leave any information inside. I pulled it out, a Polaroid photograph. My hands went cold. The photo showed this cabin, taken from somewhere in the tree line about 50 yards out. Night shot, grainy, but clear enough. Our truck was visible in the frame, parked exactly where it sat now. But here's what made my cop instincts scream. We'd arrived yesterday evening after dark. I flipped the photo over, written in neat block letters. "Welcome home, Sergeant Donovan." I stood there, coffee forgotten, scanning the tree line. Whoever took this knew who I was, knew my rank, and they'd been here, watching, before we even arrived. Blaine found me on the porch 10 minutes later, still holding the photo. "Vernon, you look like you've seen a ghost." I handed it to him, without a word. Watched his face change as he processed what he was seeing. The same expression I'd seen 100 times when we'd caught a case that was going to be bad. "Well," he said quietly, "shit." We decided not to tell Blaine right away. No point alarming him until we knew more. Blaine and I did what we'd done for decades. We investigated. "Could be kids," Blaine suggested, though his tone said he didn't believe it. "Teenagers messing with tourists." "Kids don't use Polaroids anymore," I said. "And they don't know my rank. That information isn't on my truck, isn't on the rental agreement. Whoever wrote that did research." We split up, circling the cabin at different distances, looking for footprints, disturbed ground, anything. The forest floor was covered in pine needles and fallen leaves, not ideal for tracking. After an hour, we had nothing. Blaine emerged around 9, looking refreshed in a way that made me remember he was still young. 32, but to me, he'd always be the kid who used to ride on my shoulders. "You guys are up early," he said, pouring coffee. "Want to hit that trail before lunch?" "Actually, Visual," I said. "Mind checking the shed out back? I think I saw some fishing gear we could use." It was Blaine's idea, give him something to do while we kept searching. Blaine headed off, and Blaine and I expanded our perimeter. That's when Blaine shouted. We found him behind the shed, holding something small and camouflaged. A trail camera, the kind hunters use to monitor game. "This was strapped to that tree," Blaine said, pointing to a pine with a clear sightline to the cabin. "Weird place for it, right? It's aimed at the house, not a game trail." Blaine and I exchanged looks. Blaine was tech-savvy, worked with computers for a living. "Can you check what's on it?" I asked. "Sure, if it has an SD card." He popped open the back panel. "Yeah, here, give me a minute." We went inside. Blaine pulled out his laptop, inserted the card, and started clicking through files. His expression changed quickly. "Dad, there's weeks of footage here." He was right. The timestamps went back nearly 2 months. Footage of the cabin at various times of day and night, different people coming and going, previous renters, I assumed. Some clips showed couples on the porch, families unloading cars, a single woman reading by the fire pit. Then we got to the recent files, footage of our truck arriving yesterday, clear shots of our faces as we unloaded gear, night vision clips of the cabin with lights on inside, shadows moving past windows. And the most recent file, timestamped this morning, me standing on the porch, holding the Polaroid, Blaine joining me moments later. "Someone's watching us right now," Blaine said, his voice tight. "They filmed you this morning. This thing is still active." Blaine was already on his feet looking out the window. "We need to call the sheriff." "No signal," Blaine reminded him. "Then we drive to town," Blaine said. I was thinking about something else. The previous footage, all those different people, all those different renters. How many people have stayed here recently? I wondered aloud. Blaine scrolled through the timeline. "Looks like dozen groups, maybe, over 2 months. And whoever's watching has footage of all of them," Blaine said grimly. That's when I noticed something else in one of the earlier clips. A person, alone, late at night. Older man, gray beard. He was sitting on the porch, beer in hand, looking relaxed. Timestamp, 4 months ago. Something about his posture seemed familiar. "Can you zoom in on that guy's face?" I asked Blaine. He did. The image pixelated but stayed clear enough. My stomach dropped. I know him, Bob Fletcher, retired police chief from Ridgway County. We met at a law enforcement conference a few years back. Small world, Blaine said. Maybe, I replied. Or maybe not. Blaine, didn't you hear something about a chief going missing on a hunting trip last spring? Blaine's face went pale. Bob Fletcher, that was the name. They never found him. We were in the truck within 10 minutes, heading down the mountain toward town. Blaine sat in back, clutching his laptop with the SD card still inserted. Blaine rode shotgun, his old service weapon, which he'd brought just in case, now in his lap. I'd retrieved mine from my locked case in the cabin. The drive felt longer going down than it had coming up. Every curve, every shadow between trees made me hyper-aware. 30 years of police work teaches you to trust your instincts, and right now, mine were screaming that we were in serious danger. The town of Riverside wasn't much. One main street, a gas station, a general store, and a sheriff's substation that looked like it might actually be someone's converted garage. We pulled up to the store first. Better cell signal, and I wanted to check something before involving local law enforcement. Inside, an older woman stood behind the counter, arranging packages of beef jerky. Her name tag read, Martha. She looked up with the practiced smile of someone used to tourists. "Morning, gentlemen, up at the cabins?" "Yes, ma'am," I said. "The Ridgeview rental, up on Timber Road." Something flickered in her expression. Quick, almost imperceptible. But I'd interrogated enough people to catch it. "Nice property," she said neutrally. "You need supplies?" I walked to the community board near the door. Missing persons flyers, lost pet notices, announcements for church socials, and there, slightly faded, a flyer that made my blood run cold. Robert Fletcher, age 62, last seen April 15th, retired police chief. Below that, partially covered by a yard sale notice, James Morrison, age 58, missing since July 3rd, retired sheriff's deputy. I pulled both flyers down, brought them to the counter. "Ma'am, these men, did they rent cabins around here before they disappeared?" Martha's friendly demeanor evaporated. "I don't know anything about that, but you recognize the pattern," Blaine said, stepping closer. "We're not the first retired cops to come through here and have problems, are we?" She looked at the three of us, then at the flyers, then back at us. Her shoulders sagged. There was one more. Local didn't make a flyer. Ed Pearson, retired state trooper, rented a place up on Cascade Ridge. That was September. His daughter reported him missing after he didn't show up for her wedding. 3 retired law enforcement officers, I said, all gone missing after renting remote cabins in this area, and nobody thought to connect the dots? "Sheriff Tompkins says it's just coincidence," Martha said defensively. "Lots of people go missing in the mountains. Bears, falls, exposure. With all their gear left behind," Blaine interrupted. "Because that's usually what they find, isn't it? Vehicles, supplies, everything except the person." Martha didn't answer. She didn't have to. Blaine had been quiet, but now he spoke up, his voice strained. "Dad, we need to leave. Right now. Forget the cabin, forget our stuff. We just go." He was right, of course. That would be the smart play. Pack up, drive home, report everything to proper authorities, let them handle it. But I was thinking about Bob Fletcher, about Jim Morrison, about Ed Pearson, about their families who never got answers, about whoever was out there in those woods, watching, waiting, hunting men like me. I'd spent 30 years hunting predators. I wasn't about to start running from one now. "No," I said, "we're going back." Grant and I had been planning our annual deer hunting trip to northern Wisconsin for 3 months. 15 years without interruption, ever since we both hit 40. Now in our mid-50s, with me retired from the police force and Grant having just sold his construction business, this tradition meant more than ever. It was our escape from everything. The hunting lodge we found online seemed perfect, remote, deep in the old-growth forest, 10 miles from the nearest town. The reviews were exceptional, 5 bright stars across the board. Every guest praised the host, Clayton, calling him attentive and thoughtful. "Clayton went above and beyond," one hunter wrote. "He knew exactly what I needed." The drive up was spectacular, autumn colors blazing through the forest. But as we climbed higher, a thick fog rolled in, reducing visibility to almost nothing. Grant, driving his F-150, slowed to a crawl. "Never seen fog like this," he muttered. Neither had I. In 30 years as a cop, I'd experienced plenty of strange weather, but this felt different, unnatural, like a warning. When we finally reached the lodge, we could barely see 20 feet ahead. The building itself was solid, heavy timber construction, stone chimney, everything a serious hunter needed. We unlocked the door with Clayton's key and stepped inside. The interior was perfect. Stone fireplace, mounted deer heads, leather furniture. On the kitchen table sat a welcome basket filled with premium bourbon, jerky, and a handwritten note. "Welcome Damon and Grant," I read aloud. "Wishing you a successful hunt. I've left some items I thought you'd enjoy." "Nice touch," Grant said, examining the bourbon. I continued reading. "Damon, I noticed from your profile photo that you have a Remington 700. Excellent choice. I've marked the best hunting spots on this map specifically for you. The Eastern Ridge is perfect for trophy bucks." I froze. How did he know my rifle model? "What's wrong?" Grant asked. "He identified my gun from my profile picture," I said slowly. "That's a tiny thumbnail image. He'd have to zoom in significantly and know weapons well." Grant shrugged. "Maybe he's just detail-oriented. Wants good reviews. Don't read too much into it, Damon. You've been on edge since retirement." Maybe he was right, but 30 years on the force had taught me to trust my instincts. And right now, those instincts were screaming that something was off. We unpacked our gear, 2 rifles, ammunition, hunting knives, supplies for 3 days. Everything we needed. Grant started a fire while I studied Clayton's map. It was remarkably detailed, with several locations circled in red ink. Handwritten notes indicated recent buck sightings, including a 12-pointer. "This guy really knows his stuff," Grant said. "We're going to have a great trip." I wanted to believe that, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That evening, after a simple dinner, we sat by the fire discussing tomorrow's hunt. The fog remained thick outside, pressing against the windows like something alive. Around 10:30, we heard it, the sound of an axe chopping wood, steady, rhythmic, thunk, thunk, thunk. Grant sat up straight. "Someone's chopping wood? At this hour?" We went to the window but couldn't see anything through the fog. The chopping continued, steady and mechanical, and it was moving. Slowly but definitely, the sound grew closer. "Probably another hunter," Grant suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Out here?" I said. "In this fog? At 11 at night?" I retrieved my Glock from my bag, a habit from my police days. Grant saw this, and his casual demeanor vanished. "You really think we need that?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but something's not right." The chopping continued for an hour, circling the lodge, always moving closer. Then, just before midnight, it stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. We waited, listening, but heard nothing more. "Maybe they left," Grant whispered. I didn't believe it, but eventually, exhaustion won. Grant fell asleep in his chair around 1 a.m. I stayed awake, Glock in my lap, watching the fog-shrouded windows. Nothing happened that night. But in the morning, when we went outside to investigate, we found them. Footprints, fresh boot prints circling the entire lodge. Size 12 or 13, heavy treads, deliberate steps, and 20 feet from the door, a large pile of wood chips, still smelling of fresh-cut pine. Someone had been out there all night, walking around our lodge, chopping wood in the darkness, and we had no idea who or why. Grant and I stood in the cold morning air, staring at the evidence. The boot prints were unmistakable, purposeful, deliberate circles around the lodge. This wasn't a confused hiker or lost hunter. Someone had intentionally stalked us all night. "We need to call Clayton," I said, pulling out my phone. No signal. I walked around the clearing, holding my phone high. Nothing. "There was signal yesterday when we arrived," Grant said, his voice tight. "I know." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. We decided to drive down the mountain until we got reception. 10 minutes down the winding road, my phone finally came to life. I pulled over and called Clayton. He answered cheerfully. "Damon, how's the hunting going?" "Clayton, do you have neighbors up here? Other hunters on the property?" A pause. "No, Damon, this is completely private land. The nearest cabin is 8 miles away. Why? Is something wrong?" I explained about the chopping sounds and the footprints. Clayton sounded genuinely surprised. Or he was an excellent actor. "That's very strange. I've never had reports of trespassers before. Could it have been a bear? They're common in that area and can leave tracks that look almost human." "These are boot prints, Clayton. Clear treads. And someone was chopping wood with an axe." Another pause, longer this time. When Clayton spoke again, something in his voice had changed. Still friendly, but with an edge I couldn't identify. I'm really sorry about this. Look, it's probably just a poacher passing through. They know these woods well and sometimes cut trails. Do you want me to come up? I can be there in about 90 minutes. No, I said quickly, though I wasn't sure why I refused. We're fine, just wanted to let you know. All right, but Damon, if you see anyone suspicious, just leave. Don't confront them. These mountain people can be unpredictable. Your safety is what matters. I hung up and looked at Grant. His face was pale. Nobody within 8 miles, I said. Then who the hell was out there last night? Grant demanded. And why? I don't know, but I think we should pack up and leave. Grant hesitated. We drove 6 hours. We've been planning this for months. Are we really going to let some weirdo chopping wood scare us off? He had a point. Maybe I was overreacting. 30 years of police work had taught me to see threats everywhere, even when they didn't exist. We were 2 armed men in daylight. What could really happen? One more night, Grant pressed. We keep the guns loaded, take shifts watching. If anything else happens, we leave first thing in the morning. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We tried to hunt that day, but our hearts weren't in it. The forest felt different, hostile, watching. Every snapping twig made us jump. Every shadow seemed to move. We didn't see a single deer, despite Clayton's map showing prime hunting territory. By mid-afternoon, we returned to the lodge. I checked every door and window, testing the locks twice. Grant loaded both rifles and placed them within easy reach. I kept my Glock holstered on my hip. We're taking shifts tonight, I said firmly. You sleep first, bedroom door locked. I'll watch until midnight, then you take over until dawn. Grant nodded, the argument gone from his eyes. He was scared now, too. As darkness fell, the fog returned thicker than ever. It seemed to swallow the lodge, cutting us off from the world. Grant went to the back bedroom, and I heard the lock click. I sat in the darkened living room, with only the fire's glow for light. I wanted my eyes adjusted to darkness, wanted to hear every sound. The hours crawled past. 10 p.m., 11. Nothing but the crackling fire and the oppressive silence of the fog. At 11:47, I heard it, a subtle metallic sound from the back door. Someone was trying a key in the lock. My heart hammered as I drew my Glock and moved silently toward the kitchen. The handle turned slowly, testing, then stopped. Footsteps on the deck, heavy, deliberate, moving from the back toward the side of the house. I moved to wake Grant, but before I could call out, the side window exploded inward. Glass shattered across the floor. A black-gloved hand reached through, and I saw the axe. "Grant!" I shouted. "Now!" The bedroom door burst open, and Grant appeared with the rifle. "Get back!" I yelled at the window, aiming my Glock. "Get back, or I will shoot!" The hand withdrew. Then slowly, a face appeared in the firelight. Clayton, but not the friendly host from the photos. This Clayton's eyes were cold and calculating, his smile unnatural. He wore black tactical gear and gripped a massive hunting axe. "Damon? Grant," he said, his voice eerily calm. "Why make this difficult?" "Get out!" Grant shouted, his rifle shaking. "We're calling the police right now!" Clayton laughed, a wet, disturbing sound that made my skin crawl. "No signal up here, Grant. You know that. I made sure of it. A simple jammer, really. Technology is wonderful." That explained everything. The sudden loss of reception at the lodge. "I know all about you, Damon," Clayton continued, his voice conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. 30 years as a cop in Milwaukee. Retired last year after the Johnson case. That shooting broke you, didn't it? You still see that kid's face." My blood turned to ice. The Johnson case wasn't public record. Internal Affairs had buried it. How could he possibly know? And Grant, that construction company didn't just get sold, did it? You were 3 months from bankruptcy. Failed project in Madison. Your wife still doesn't know how bad it really was. Grant's face went white. "You son of a—" "I'm giving you a choice," Clayton interrupted, his smile widening. "You can run. Make it to your truck. Maybe you'll escape. Maybe you won't. Or—" He paused, savoring the moment. "You can stay, and we'll talk about why you're really here." "We're here to hunt," I said, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. No, Damon, you're here because you needed this. Both of you, running from your failures, your regrets. I give people what they need, a real hunt, real fear, real stakes. Everything else in your lives has become so safe, so meaningless. He was insane, a psychopath who hunted people for sport, who justified it with twisted philosophy. Grant, I whispered. Back door. On 3, we run for the truck. But Clayton heard. I wouldn't recommend that. I've been in these woods for 15 years. I know every tree, every path. The fog is my friend. Can you say the same? He was trying to keep us here, keep us talking. That meant he wasn't confident about catching us in the open. 1, I counted. Clayton's smile faded. Don't. 2. You're making a mistake. 3. I fired twice toward Clayton, not to kill, but to drive him back. The gunshots were deafening in the enclosed space. Clayton dove away from the window. Grant and I bolted for the back door. The fog swallowed us instantly. I could barely see Grant 3 feet ahead. We crashed through brush, branches tearing at our clothes. Behind us, I heard Clayton's boots pounding the deck. Keys! I gasped. Got them! Grant fumbled in his pocket as we ran. We reached the truck. Grant's hands shook violently as he unlocked it. We threw ourselves inside, and I slammed the locks down just as a shadow materialized from the fog. Clayton slammed the axe against Grant's window. The glass spiderwebbed, but held. Go! I screamed. Grant jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. Headlights cut through the fog, and there was Clayton, standing directly in front of the truck, axe resting on his shoulder. Blood seeped through his jacket where my bullet had grazed him, but he seemed not to notice. He was smiling. Grant floored the accelerator. At the last second, Clayton stepped aside with inhuman calm, and we rocketed past him down the mountain road. Gravel sprayed, tires screamed, engine howling as Grant pushed the F-150 to its limits on the winding road. I kept checking the mirrors. No headlights followed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Clayton was still there, somehow watching us flee. We drove 40 miles to the nearest police station, arriving just after dawn. The sheriff listened to our story with increasing skepticism. And you say this, Clayton attacked you? The lodge owner? Yes, he knew things about us, private things. He had a jammer blocking cell signals. The sheriff exchanged glances with his deputy. Mr. Hartley, we know Clayton Reed. He's owned that property for 12 years. Volunteers at the church. Coaches Little League. Never had a single complaint. Then come see the lodge, Grant insisted. The broken window, the bullet holes, the blood. They agreed, and we led a convoy of 2 patrol cars back up the mountain. My stomach churned as we approached. Something was wrong. I could feel it. The lodge looked peaceful in the morning light. We entered with the officers. Everything was immaculate. No broken window, no blood, no bullet holes in the walls. The glass I'd shot out was perfectly intact. Gentlemen, the sheriff said carefully, are you sure this happened? I shot him, I insisted. But even to my own ears, it sounded desperate. I hit him in the shoulder. They searched anyway, found nothing. No shell casings. I realized with horror that I'd used my Glock, and in our panic, we'd left the casings on the floor. Clayton must have cleaned them up. No evidence of forced entry, no wood chips or footprints, though there had been rain overnight that would have washed them away. They called Clayton. He answered immediately, sounding concerned. Told them he'd been home all night. His wife confirmed it. He seemed genuinely worried about us, suggested we might have experienced carbon monoxide poisoning from the fireplace, offered to pay for medical examinations. The officers looked at us with pity. Sometimes the isolation up here can play tricks on people, the sheriff said gently, especially with that fog. Maybe you gentlemen should head home, get some rest. We had no choice, no evidence, just our word against a pillar of the community. That was 4 years ago. Grant and I don't speak anymore. That trip destroyed our friendship. He thinks I was paranoid, that my mind created the threat. Maybe he needs to believe that to sleep at night. But I know the truth. Once a month, an email arrives from an anonymous address. No subject line, no message, just a photo attachment. It's always the same image. Me and Grant, asleep in our chairs that first night. Photographed from inside the lodge. The angle proves it. Clayton had been inside with us, watching us sleep before the attack ever began. I've shown the emails to the police. They say there's nothing they can do. No threats, no crime, just photos that could have been taken by anyone. I still check the lodge listing sometimes. It's still there, reviews still glowing. Clayton was amazing, so attentive, knew exactly what we needed. I wonder how many others he's hunted, how many never made it to their trucks. Late at night, I sometimes hear it, that steady rhythmic chopping. Thunk, 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 getting closer. I know it's just in my head, but I keep the Glock loaded on my nightstand anyway. Clayton is still out there, still hunting, still playing his game with perfect cover, a respected community member, impossible to accuse. And somewhere in the Wisconsin woods, that lodge sits waiting. New victims arrive every season, lured by promises of the perfect hunt. They think they're the hunters. They're wrong. Clayton is the only real hunter in those woods, and he's very, very good at what he does. The police won't help. No one believes us. And that's exactly how Clayton planned it.